All right. Be with me now. Cool, thank you. So, let's do a Mod 2 overview. So, this is an overview. It is not a lesson. This is exactly like your Mod 1 overview. I'm going to show you the things that you should be able to do at the end of 2 weeks. You should not be able to do any of these things right now. If you could do these things already, you would need to be here. So, we're just talking about what the finish line looks like. If you cannot do a single one of these things after this, you're meeting expectations. Questions before we begin? Yeah.
So are we, I don't want to say done with Ruby, but like, are we just moving into JavaScript now rather than working more with Ruby?
We're doing both. So these things are gerbil script. That's Ruby. So we're going to do a bit of both. But we'll probably, in the neighborhood of tomorrow, start scratching at JavaScript a little bit. But you guys will spend the rest of the program jumping back and forth between all kinds of languages and frameworks and stuff, and you'll know the pain.
Yes.
Cool. Great question. Other ones? Cool. Let's dig in. So I'm kind of naming Mod 2 the start of web apps. You learned some programming stuff, and you learned how to make command line apps in the last mod. Now we're going to start learning how web apps work. What do I mean by web apps? What's a web app? Yeah, Damon. Yep, that's it. There's applications you can install on your phone. There's applications you can install on your desktop. There's applications that you can install in your car. And then there's applications that you run in a browser. That's a web app. So generally speaking, the way that a web app works, and you will get real used to seeing me draw variations on this diagram over the next 12 weeks. So you have a browser, and your browser downloads the app from a file server. This is like Google Drive, except for grown-ups. So you're going to keep all your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript, your images, your PDFs, all that stuff. It's going to live on a file server, and your browser asks for it. And then you are going to make requests to an API that's probably connected to a database. You say, cool, here's the app. What's the data for the app? We're going to keep those separate. Then the data is going to come back, and we're going to go, cool, I'd like to add something to the data. And so you make that request to the API, it throws it in the database, gives you a response, gives it back to the browser. This, more or less, is the shape of about 90% plus of web apps. Have some kind of structure like this. Let's spend a sec just looking at this. What questions do you have so far? God, I explained this good. Damon.
So the file server.
Yep.
So the user is on the browser.
Yep.
They make a request for information by, say, loading a URL.
Yep.
Does it go to the file server first, or like is there simultaneous action like between the API and file server? How does that interaction work?
It's a great question. So we'll get in a little bit deeper when we start talking about the web and the internet. But you type in google.com, there's actually a little sneaky thing that happens in between called a DNS request. And you say, hey, where the fuck is google.com? And the DNS server tells you the google.com server is located here on the network. And then your browser makes a HTTP request to that place that it told it to, and then this computer takes it from there. It goes, cool, you're looking for an index.html file, I see. You're looking for an app.js file, I see. You're looking for prettycat.jpg, I see. Here you go. And your browser loads it up. Good question. What else? Cool, let's see it in action. So we're gonna start with this part of the web app thing. So we're gonna start with some HTML. So, projects, practice, and this will be mod 2 asterisk overview. Perfect. So nothing in this folder, no trick up this sleeve, no trick up this sleeve. I make an index.html file and an app.css file, and just for good measure, I'll make an app.js file also. So now I have these 3 files. Yeah?
When you made that directory, you said MKCD. Is that like a iTerm thing?
That's a Coberly special. So thank you so much for noticing. So I have a script that whenever I load a terminal, it makes this function called mkcd that goes mkdir and then CDs into it. How nice is that?
That's cool. It's just 2 steps in one.
Exactly. And then I have, you probably also see me do C to clear. And for move and copy, I have this interactive flag on them. So every time I move, I'm actually doing move-I. So that gives you a prompt so you don't delete stuff or overwrite stuff that you don't want to. Cool. Good question. All right, so I did mkcd to get into this. I made these 3 empty files. And then I'm going to open up, let's start a session. I'm going to use a tool called Light Server. So what Light Server does is it takes the folder that I'm in right now and turns it into a file server locally.
Does it refresh automatically when you add like lines of HTML?
It certainly does.
Cool.
So this is saying if you go to localhost 3000 in your browser, we will treat this like a traditional server. And so if you do things like go to localhost 3000, it's going to look for a file called index.html, because that is default server behavior. Goes, cool, if you weren't asking for anything in particular, how about I just give you the index? Then we're going to hop into that index.html file, and we're going to build an HTML document. So we're going to talk more about what construes these this afternoon. But for right now, we'll say that HTML documents have heads and bodies. The head is stuff that we can't see. The body is stuff we can see. Stuff that we can't see. How about that style sheet that I made? So I'll say it's a style sheet, and it is located in app.css. Also, to be a legal HTML document, it needs a title, and it needs a character set. We'll talk about what character sets are another day, but it's how they know that we're writing Roman characters rather than Cyrillic characters. And then down here in the body, we're going to attach that gerbil script file. Cool. And now I have the structure of HTML boilerplate. And we can sanity check ourselves if I can make a tag and make it show up on the page. So there it is. All right, so we're going to make an app called Barkwire. It's a dating app for dogs. And we'll say this is Barkwire, the dating app for dogs. And it's going to have something that says check out our pups. And then we're going to show a list of dogs down here. And maybe there's a Bilbo Wagons and a Helga Hufflepuff. And somebody give me another one.
Bucket.
What?
I met a dog the other weekend named Bucket.
Bucket? I like it.
Okay, I know a dog named Buckets because he drinks a lot.
All right, so we got some buddies over here. Neat. Problem is, this looks like shit. So how about we style it? So with this attached style sheet, I can do things like, let's take that header that I made. I'm going to give it a background color of, see, HSL works off of a color wheel. So 0 and 360 are red. 120 is green, 240 is blue. So you can sort of like, it's so much better than hex because you can like actually figure out colors with your brain. You can go, all right, I'm gonna go with like a kind of muted green. So it's probably gonna be somewhere in the neighborhood of 240. I'm gonna say that it's half saturated and a little bit lighter than medium. All right, perfect. So now it's got that stupid browser default box around all of it. So I'm going to kill off that. Margin 0, padding 0. All right. And I'm also going to apply that to headings. All right, now we're getting somewhere. I'm going to put a little bit of padding in the header. All right. What more? Yeah. Now for that H1. One of the easiest ways you can make something not look terrible. I want you to see how quick this is because people are like, yeah, I just ran out of time, so I was using the browser default typefaces. All right, it's 10:21, and with me narrating this. All right, so we have all these fonts here. Hey, what do you know? Roboto's a pretty good font. Typeface. We'll talk more about the difference between those another day. All right, I want regular and bold and light for that. And then I want to import it into this style sheet. Cool. And then I want to say that the entire body should use font family Roboto, and then fall back to sans serif. And if I do that, even with narrating it, I've improved the typeface. That was under a minute. So I ran out of time, couldn't style the project. I'm not buying it. Okay, so now I'm going to say that this H1 is going to use a font weight of 300. Let's thin that out a little bit. Hey, there we go. I'm also going to say that it shouldn't have much of a bottom margin. Was that padding? No. Maybe that's the paragraph tag under it. So I'll say any paragraph inside of a header should have a small to no margin bottom. What about top? There we go. That's getting better. Okay, so I've got this bark wire thing going on here. And then I had that main tag. We're going to create a little bit of breathing room in there. And then I'm going to say that the list that those puppers are in is going to have a list style of none and a margin, sorry, padding left of 0. All right. And then all list items are going to have a margin bottom of 1 rem. All right. And then I'm going to add some pictures. So we'll say cute dog. There we go. This is what we play for. All right, so I'm going to grab that URL, and these list items are now going to have a name and a URL and a label. And all right, cool. Then I'll do the same thing here, Helga, Hufflepup, and bucket. Then I'll also say that these images should have a max width of 100%. There we go. All right, cool. So that's our app. So what we're doing, my browser says, hey, server on localhost 3000, you have an index.html page. Why, yes, I do. Then an index.html page says, hey, do you have a style sheet by chance? Why, yes, I do. Cool. Start loading up this page. Oh, cool. There's a URL for a dog on there. Cool. I'm going to go get that from the internet. Start rendering that on the page. Gets down to the bottom. Cool. Do you happen to have an app.js file? Why, yes, I do. Because it's back to you. So that's what we've done. And then in context of building websites, that's kind of what we're talking about. There we go. What's up?
Just quick curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
When you're making an app, is it better to just probably save the images in your folder than use URLs? Or is there any preference? Does it matter?
It's a good question. So, and I'll say, ask me another time because it's a really complicated answer.
Okay.
This is okay for prototyping. I also made this dependent on this person hosting my images, which is rude. And also, like, you'll never know when that breaks. So you might want to keep your own copies of it. and how and where you keep copies, and whether or not they actually stay on that particular file server or on a different file server that's only for images. And since those tend to be larger, do you CDN them, which means like, do you put them on a server that's physically close to the person who's requesting it? Because if I'm hosting that in Indonesia, like that request needs to go to Indonesia and back. Versus if I'm in Indonesia and I'm hosting in Oregon, now it needs to go across the ocean again. So I might keep copies of it all over the world. That's why that's a complicated answer. Cool, good question though. Other questions about building websites?
I'm just curious about a decision you made in there. So
Yeah.
with the Google Fonts, I had always imported the font via a link in my HTML.
Mhm.
So how come you decided to use the input URL?
That's a great question. Because I want this app CSS file to own anything having to do with the presentation of this app. I don't want to have to go back to the index HTML file to go like, oh, I'm changing my font stack, so I should go back to the HTML. That feels weird to me. So I'm using this as the like port of entry for all things style. And Google Fonts doesn't show you that by default. It shows you this. If you go over to this @import syntax, that's how you put it in a style sheet instead.
So would you, in general, whatever font you're using on a given web page, post them at the top like that?
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions about websites? And again, we'll talk more about websites in general today, but where they fit into this ecosystem.
Just one question about
Yeah.
the light server that would be set up.
Yep.
It didn't work on mine, so
Oh, you have to install it.
yeah, I installed that already.
Okay, cool. So my advice to you right now, don't follow along.
Okay.
We'll do that later. Cool. Other questions about how websites fit into the web app ecosystem? Cool. So now, the problem is if all of this is dynamic, we got puppers who are making profiles. We have people who are deleting their profiles. This data is changing. Right now, if I want to do that, I have to rewrite the HTML page every time. That doesn't work. So what do I do? DOM manipulation is certainly part of it. Big picture, scroll out. What do I do so I don't need to rewrite my HTML page every time? Yeah.
Write a program that writes it for you.
Sure. And that's what traditional Rails apps do. You request the server is like, hey, give me all the current dogs. And then what the Rails app does is goes, cool, I have the shape of the HTML that should come back. Now I'm just going to slot in the actual dogs in there, turn that into an HTML file, and send that to you. So in present day, what we're more likely to do is do that the programming gymnastics on that in the browser, and then we're going to keep our data separate from the app. And so we can say, hey, give me all the data on the dogs, and then I'm going to use JavaScript in the browser to make them show up. That's the most common way now. So to give you an idea of what that would look like, let's hop over to that our gerbil script file that we have attached here. But first, we're going to smoke test. I'm going to say, is this actually wired up? And when I go over here, it is. Neat. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to figure out what of this is part of the data for this and which is the part of the structure of it. So when I look at these, I'm just going to copy these over to the JavaScript file. I go, okay, from a data standpoint, like if I was trying to put this in a database table or something, it's got a name and an image URL. So what if I had that as just some data that I had access to? And so I'll say, all right, this one has a name. It's Bilbo Wagons. And its image URL is this. And then this one was Helga Hufflepuff, and this one was Buckets. Bucket, that's correct. Sorry. So, hey, you guys don't know any JavaScript, but this should be kind of familiar, right? We're storing a collection of hashes, something kind of like key value pairs. It's not any different. Programming's programming. And then this is where we get into something that's kind of unique to JavaScript, something that's cool, is what if I can iterate like each style, map style, whatever, and make elements out of these? So maybe I write a function, it's kind of like a method, to that takes in this data, turns those into elements. So I'm going to say I got a function called dog2element. And it takes in a dog and says, all right, I am going to, how did I structure these? I'm going to make an li with a p tag and an image tag. So maybe I say the li is document.create element li. And the li's inner HTML is this, but remember string interpolation in Ruby? Do the same kind of thing in JavaScript. Say I want that to be the dog's name, and I want this to be the dog's image URL. I'm going to make this the dog's name also. Okay, so, and then I return this. I have turned a dog into an element. Now I can say dog elements are dogs.map. Hey, what do you know? You have that too. And then for each dog, I want to call dog to element. Neat. Now I have, let's sanity check. See if I actually have a list of dog elements. Hey, what do you know? 3 LIs. Beautiful. And I'm going to go, cool, dog elements dot for each. For each dog, I want to get that UL. So I will select the UL DOM element. Do document dot query selector UL, and then I want to append the dog. And now what I'm going to do is delete all those dogs that I coded in. But what do you know? There they are. There you go. Kyle. It's a cast version of the app. Oh, is it? What happens when I make their names really exciting? Some excited buddies. So what I did was I took that hard-coded data. Now I have the shell of the app. I have the structure of the app, the bones. I've styled them, and I've separated out the data, and I make HTML with that and put it on the page. That's the big thing we're doing. So that is JS proficiency, and this is what we call DOM nodes. We don't say elements, we say DOM nodes. And we'll talk about why we call them DOM nodes and not elements another day. Questions thus far? Yep.
Can you go back to your code just for a second?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so those HTML tags, like the P and the image source,
Yeah.
is that kind of like a shortcut for setting, or getting the element and setting in your HTML?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's super hacky, but otherwise I'd have to like do this document.create element I did with the P and the image and set the source and with the doing it as a string interpolation reads easier. Yeah, Ben.
What the dollar sign stands
The dollar signs, as you will learn, are a thing that Old Man Coberly does. They're not special. They're just characters. You don't have to have them. You can make them underscores. You can make them anything. But they're a hint that this is a DOM node, not a string, not an object, not anything else. And developers of a certain generation did this because of a tool called jQuery, where that was a really common pattern, and I still like it. But it's just a style thing. Good question. What else? Yeah.
On your dog elements dot for each dog, is that looking at each element?
Yes. So this turns the data into a DOM node. This takes a DOM node and puts it on the page. And you want to see some real JS proficiency? You can also chain those together. So we could say that, and now we don't even need to keep that variable. And I could even make a function out of this and say add dog to page that takes in a dog, does all those things, and now, look how good that reads. Cool. So we've talked about building websites, talked about JavaScript proficiency, talked about DOM nodes. And coincidentally, we've also talked about the web and the internet a little bit. That's a fun conversation, and I think it makes a lot more sense once you yourself have written a lot more of these requests. But we'll basically take this diagram and talk about it for like an hour and a half, because there's a lot of goodness in there. Cool. Next step. The problem I have now is I really just moved my like hard-coded data problem from the HTML to the app.js file. The problem is like, okay, cool, somebody updates their profile, deletes a dog, whatever. Well, now I just need to rewrite the app.js file. That's not good. We're still in this world where we're just inside of the blue box here. So the way we make this truly dynamic is we need to move all those dogs over to a database. And then we need a way to ask for them over the network. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a Rails API. And this is where your Ruby knowledge is going to come in handy. So I'm going to say RVM use 2.6. Rails new Barkwire API, and it is an API. So this is going to build out a Ruby-based API for me, and there's all kinds of neat stuff that we can do in that. For example, if I hop into the Barkwire API over here, I'm going to say I want a model. So I'd like Rails to generate one for me. Rails generate model dog. And it makes a migration, makes the model file. It's pretty cool. I'm going to say, hey, Rails, while you're at it, why don't you give me a controller so that I can get a list of these dogs. And then I would like you, let's see, there's a couple other config kinds of things. Rails looks enormous. Look at all those folders. Look at all those files. To get an API working, there's actually very few that we need to work with. But one of them is we need to turn on that gem. We need to uncomment out these lines. And we need to say that anybody can use this API. Then we're going to go back over here. We're going to install that gem. It's installed. And now we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to say whenever a request comes in for dogs, handle it in the standard way. That's all we have to do. Rails is what's called a conventional framework or a convention over configuration framework, otherwise known as an opinionated framework. This is if you are doing normal things the normal way, we give you everything for free. You want to get weird with it, we're going to punish you for it. So the other side of that is like, you can do anything you can imagine. You have to do it all yourself. And there's a spectrum between those. Rails was the defining example of conventional, opinionated. And so what this is turning into under the hood is a mountain of stuff. But we're doing APIs the normal way. So then we go into dogs controller. We say, all right, when a request for dogs comes in, I'm going to handle it. And I want you to make a method called index. And I want you to get every dog we've got. And hey, this is familiar, right? This is just that same active record shit we were just doing. And then what I want you to do is render as JSON those dogs. Ta-da! Over in our dog migration, we're going to make a name and an image URL. And cool. Let's make some seeds. So we'll say every time I run this, semantically that's horrifying, but Rails made me do it. So I'm going to put my dog, my old dog, Bixby, and Mesa. And over here, Bixby dog. All right. And Mesa dog. It's a dating profile if I've ever seen one. All right, so I'm going to seed the database with those two dogs. So I need to Rails DB migrate, and we're migrated. I need to Rails DB seed, Rails DB seed, and we're seeded. And what I should be able to do with this minimal amount of code is I should be able to go to, let's see, localhost 3000 dogs. Oh, I should probably run the server. That helps. All right, so if I look at localhost 9000 on dogs, hey, this looks like the same stuff we were getting back from APIs back in old Mod 1. So that's cool. I can hit a URL, it looks something up in a database, gives it back to me, poops it back out. So all I need to do is bridge these two things together. And I do that with a tool called fetch. So back over here in JS land, I'll do all these same things except dogs isn't going to be hard-coded anymore. I need to fetch, hey, dogs, fetch, rock on. Localhost 9000 dogs. Hit that URL, and then with the JSON that you get back, I would like you to parse it. And then I should have a list of dogs. And what I want you to do is all of these things. Cool. Hey, look. Those came from a network. Those came from a different server. Those came from the API. That's how we separate out the data of an app and the structure of an app.
Sorry, can you go back to that?
Mm-hmm.
The edited, that's edited.
I
Does
said,
that go to localhost 9000?
yep, right there. I say, hey, make a request to this URL,
Sure.
parse the response, and what I get back from that is an array of dogs, just like I had hard-coded up here. Except now, I don't need this anymore. But I can still do all the same things to it. Sick. So, last thing that we need to be able to do in this module, submit data using forms. This is probably it's probably the one that's going to be the hackiest. Of the things that you do in this program, everything I just showed you is basically how it works, as I think Cody can attest. The one thing that will be slightly different this mod than it is in the next mod is this form idea. So we're going to say, all right, I want to make a new dog and give it a label, image URL. It's going to be its name, and this is going to also have an ID of name, and this is going to be for name, and this one is going to be for image URL. This one is going to have an ID of image URL and a name of image URL, and that's going to have a submit button. It's going to say add pup. All right, so we look over on our HTML page. All right, I have this janky looking form down here. So first thing I'm going to do is throw that inside of main. All right, it fixes that a little bit. Over in our CSS file, I can say inputs and labels should each take up their own line. All right, that helps. I'm going to say that inputs have a margin bottom of 1. Okay, looking better already. I'm going to say that forms have a max width of 400 pixels, and that each of these should take up all of it. All right, I'm going to shrink that down a little bit. Cool. And I'm going to give that submit button a little bit of padding. Cool. So that's going to be my add dog form. Perfect. So to make this make a network request, we're going to tell it to post. We need to tell it where to post to. So we're going to have it post to localhost 9,000 dogs. So when I fill out this form, it should take all of those things and send it on over to our Rails app. Now, I haven't done this before, so we'll see if this works. All right, so over here, I should be able to, Jesse, you remember, is it create? Is that the name of the action for posting in Rails? Yeah, that's right. All right, so what I want to do here is make a new dog that has a name of the thing that I sent in and an image URL of the thing that I sent in. And then I'm going to redirect to HTTP localhost 3000. All right, I think this works. Let's see. So I need another image. There we go. Heartbreaker, just heartbreaker. Never fall in love with a pomo. All right, so back in our app, I go down to the bottom of this list and I say, cool, this is Missy, and that's the picture, fingers crossed. All right. Cool. So that is submitting data using forms. All of those things together are what we're spending the next 2 weeks learning how to do. So if you're panicking right now, think about how hard you were panicking 3 weeks ago when I did this exact same thing with Rails, with those weird many-to-many relationships. You went, I'll never be able to do that. And now you can do it. That's about the same level of gap we're looking at right now. So what questions have you about what we're doing in Mod 2? Yeah.
So what's the reasoning behind separating the structural stuff and then the data?
Absolutely. So some of it is that by separating this out, now we don't need to do something like build HTML files in real time. Another is that this sort of opens the door for what we call single page apps. These aren't apps that have like one screen. They're not single screen apps. But that HTML file you get back loads once. And then you have a lot of like pulling things out of the screen and adding things into the screen. So when you go to Facebook or Gmail or any of those things, they're not actually going to different pages. They're all the same page, but it takes things off the screen and puts new things on the screen. And that gives it a very app-like feel. Because otherwise, when you go through a website, you click on something, there's kind of a big pause, and then everything goes away, and then everything comes back. So both for like the app-like feel and some efficiency in not loading and reloading those things over and over again, that's one reason to do it. Another reason to do it is that you can use the same API for a variety of different what we call clients. So, all right, this is the web app, but what if there's also an Android app or an iPhone app that uses the same data? I can have that file server scale separately from the data because this might not get as much load as that does. Good question. What else? Yeah, Stephanie.
Curious about the form that you built.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had seen that in documentation, but I'd never seen it implemented.
Mm-hmm.
What did you have to do to make sure that the back end knew what the image URL was? Like, where did you put that information so that it's connecting to the right data or putting the data in the right place?
Perfect. So forms use this name attribute. So like that's the key value pair that gets sent over. It's like, all right, the name will be name, the name will be image URL, and the value of that will be whatever is currently filled out in input. So it gets that, and then the dogs controller can pull that out of the parameters that were sent over. Good question. What else? Yeah, Colin.
What is the DOM?
The DOM is the document object model, and it's the thing, all you need to know about right now is it's the thing that lets us use JavaScript to interact with HTML. The full answer is significantly longer, but that's fundamentally what it's doing. It's linking together HTML and JavaScript. What else? Yeah, Ben.
Can you explain a little bit about one piece app when you say that is
Mm-hmm.
go for some, yeah, can you explain about Facebook and Google or something like that?
Absolutely.
Loading just one page, actually changing the content actually.
Indeed. So if you go to, let's see, that was doing it. So when I click around, that actually opened a new page. Perfect, those two. When I click back and forth between these, it looks like I'm going to a new page. I'm not. No new HTML page has been loaded. There's one. But when I click back and forth between these, it goes, okay, cool, you're trying to go somewhere else. I am going to dump all of this off the page and load in everything from this. And so it feels like an app with multiple screens, even though it's fundamentally one index.html file. And the tool that we use to make that kind of thing a little bit more sane, this is what React does. This is what Vue does, Angular, Ember. They're tools for helping us yank things off of the screen and add things on really efficiently. But all of them are built off of basically that. Yeah?
What's an example of like a website that's not single page?
Sure, great question. In the modern age, fewer and fewer. However, there's one that you use every day that is like defiantly not single page app. That is, Wikipedia. And for pretty good reason too. So when I go to all of these things, see that like kind of pause for a sec and then it all sort of switches out? That's one of your telltale hints. But as you're clicking around, those are all separate HTML pages. Those are all being dynamically generated. And there's a lot behind that, but the reason is that Wikipedia has users all over the world. And there's everything in the web is trade-offs. So doing this single page thing, we get a better experience. We can scale the API separately, all these like kind of cool things. Also, your initial load is huge compared to just getting a web page. Because the JavaScript, that's your entire app at that point. And so that could be multiple megabytes. Not a big deal if you're at a hipster office with super fast internet. If you're on a metered connection in Africa, it's a little bit rougher. So where you're paying per kilobyte. So if you have users that may be on metered connections, that's when like old-timey monoliths are actually probably a better call. Great question. What else?
Does it take up the same amount of space?
Expand that question.
I guess if you're thinking about, I guess I don't know how these are quote unquote stored.
Sure.
Is it more storage intensive, quote unquote?
Not really. What it is it sort of combines this file server kind of function with this API kind of function into one thing. And so it's doing both of them at the same time. And that is not unheard of. Like I said, that's exactly how Wikipedia works. If you've ever done anything with WordPress or Drupal, those also work that same way. They're kind of everything all in wonder. But that approach has become increasingly less common over the last decade. And it's what old-timey Mod 2 is based off of. So that's why we're dropping it. But I wouldn't say it's like more storage or anything. It just has a particular kind of trade-off to it and takes two simple things and makes them one complex thing.
So Google, that's a single HTML? Is that what you said?
Gmail's a single page app. When you're clicking around on tabs, those aren't different pages. They're just instructions to take out the previous list and replace it with a different list.
Okay, like the Google search engine is going to be separate pages then.
So if we go here, so I just made, and we can actually prove this. If I look at the network tab in my inspector, that was the network request for the HTML for this page. I requested google.com. The actual URL was this. Or sorry, the actual IP address on the network was this. These are the things that it sent me back. These are the things that I sent over. And, oops, can you give me the unparsed? Not the preview. There we go. And it sent me back all of this. Hey, HTML. And like somebody didn't type all of this like gobbledygook out. There's tools that do that for you. Okay, so that was my network request. When I look for something like, ooh, interesting. You see those requests fire off in the background? Oops, 'cause I'm still looking at XHR. So if I look for Wikipedia, so that was a separate page. And if I look at more results, that was a separate one also. Versus, if I go over here, good gravy. All right, and I think it might be showing my socket messages also. All right, so, oh, interesting. Why is it showing my XHR? But I can go around to different tabs and you see how it's not making another request. It's doing that little slow poll in the background. It's all one page. Cool. What else? Yeah.
This is kind of a general question, but for mod 2, is our project like going to be completely different from what it used to be, or is the project still the same?
The project and the assessment are the same. That's why I'm a genius. No, it's the exact same kind of project.
Okay.
We'll just be doing it in a far more modern way that sets you up for mod 3 a lot better. Yeah.
This is also really general, might be a different time, but like, where do cookies and like cash come into all this?
The way we're doing it right now, the next mod. But cookies are a way, when you request something, it can set a cookie on here that's stored over here, and then you send it on every request that you make after that. That's a cookie. So the advantage of that is I asked for the dogs, like, I'm sorry, that's members only. And you go, okay, cool, I'd like to log in. And you go, cool, I'm gonna give you back a cookie. Every time you ask for something, send that cookie over also. Then over on the API, you look inside the cookie and you go, cool, are they who they say they are? All right, cool, here's your dogs. There's other ways to handle that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more next month. Good question. What else? Cool. So this diagram right here, this is really your life for the next 12 weeks. Everything we do is like subtle variations on this. And if you can, by next Friday, do these 6 things, you're in pretty good shape. Awesome. So for today, focus on websites, focus on HTML and CSS. We don't have good Learn Labs for any of that stuff, but the links on the site,
On the MPN site?
no, they're linked to you from there. But these 5 links right here, or sorry, these 6 links here, those will get you started. We have some videos on this stuff if you want to get ahead. But otherwise, let's talk about HTML at 1 o'clock. Cool. Have at it.